Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, as usual, Neil Orfield. Whatever your name is.
Close
Player
enough.
Q DFS. The host of the High Stakes podcast on the Stochastic Podcast Network. Right, the name change. Stochastic.
I'm wearing the old Osmo hat today because it's a classic now.
Right, retro. It's a nice hat. It's almost like a Diamondbacks hat.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty similar.
Right. So the name change just so to people think of Alex as Osmo.
Yep.
And to get what happens if Alex leaves, dies, does something else? Maybe the site's name shouldn't be his name. That's what he's known for. I'm assuming that's the reason for the brand change.
Yeah, I don't know if I got the full story, but I think that's part of the reason. And just like they just don't want the entire brand to be focused on one person when there's a whole lot of people working at the site at this point. So maybe they want to, have a more universal name for the site. And yeah, maybe I have no idea what Alex's plans are long term. I know that he's slowed down his volume in DFS. I don't think that he's planning on. I haven't heard that he's planning on retiring or stepping aside anytime soon, but I guess sometime down the line this makes that more possible.
Well, he was in the MMA qualifier, whatever. He's in the championship. He's got 2 entries into round 2, so I know he's still playing, right? He's still playing plenty. But the past 2 weeks or whatever to try to get in, it's as I call it, it's people going to duplication station. Right?
Well, we call you the dupe guy.
Right, I'm the dupe. Right, of course, I'm the dupe guy. Right. Now the problem that existed this past week for that was that before the Cerrone-Lozon fight got canceled, I thought there were 3 valid cash lineups. Right, I mean like high win probability, high median lineups, and 2 of them had Cerrone in it. So once Cerrone's fight gets canceled, it's like, well, that's the lineup. And just I'll
4 out of 6 move on, so you got to play the cap.
Right, you got to play. I mean, that's what I was describing on this morning's DFS pregame show. Just
as I said, I watched the first half of that. I didn't get through all of it yet, but it seemed like an interesting discussion. Right. It was definitely fascinating seeing the EV shifts as you add in duplicates and take away duplicates and maybe multiple duplicates. It's an interesting conversation for sure.
Right. So in cash, essentially the concept is the reverse of GPPs, right? Yep. We know as GPP players that duplication slashes your expected value, right? Because you can't win first. You have to split stuff, right? So you get paid less up there. Now in cash games, however, in non-progressive payout structure contests, duplication actually increases the equity that you have in the contest. It means that you're less likely to want to be unique in a contest. So we saw in the little explanation on the pregame show that out of 6 of us, with 4 out of 6 advancing, anytime a lineup is duped, takes away equity from any of the unique lineups, assuming that all the lineups are equal to each other. Right? Yeah. That's the big assumption there. So if out of the 6 of us, if I duped with one other person, me and that other person would end up with more equity, a little bit more. And if it's duped 3 times, we get even more equity. Duped 4, if it's duped 5 times, we get the most amount of equity. Being that unique, you're in the worst case scenario. So given the choice, if a lineup is, would you rather have the duped lineup or would you rather have the unique lineup? The consideration that should be made in that scenario is what is the win probability difference between the 2 lineups. And it has to be more. The unique lineup has to have enough higher win probability than the dupe lineup to make up for that duplication equity. So I know that we were talking beforehand about, someone was disagreeing. Like someone said that I was disagreeing with some type of concept. Can you I mean, we're
Yeah, so
transparent
we
here.
didn't get deep into the conversation, so I don't know, and I didn't get to the part of the show that he was talking about, but he was saying that he had previously had a discussion with Brick75 in a Discord about whether playing the median optimal in cash games is optimal, quote unquote optimal. And I pushed back a little bit and I said, well, I think it could be true that what you're saying is true, that because of the way people play currently, playing the median optimal is generally the most optimal way to play because people, don't really counteract that necessarily. It can also be true that if you know that somebody is going to play the median optimal, that it can be exploitable. So I think it can be true that both things can be true, that it is an exploitable style to always play the median optimal, and that it is also the most plus EV way of playing against a wide range of people. And then he said, well, it can't be true in terms of like play. I think he was saying essentially that it can't be true in terms of being GTO. So I think we were kind of missing each other's points a little bit. Maybe he was saying that it's not GTO to play the median optimal because it can be exploited. Uh,
But but
so I
but but it can't. But see, the problem comes in. So the different just to clarify, there's a difference between progressively payout structure contests and non-progressively payout structure contests. So the most progressively payout structure contest there is the Millie Maker, right? Because of that gap
we
between
were talking
second
about
and
cash
fifth.
games. We were talking
Right,
about
right.
cash games.
I'm just because it's two completely separate things, and I don't want
Yep.
people to get confused. So in a cash game, the most non-progressively paid out contest is a 50-50. So let's say there's a 10-man 50-50. 5 get 1.8x their money, right? Because the rate comes out, right? Okay, so in those types of contests, in a 10-man, let's just say a 10-man 50-50, if we all agree on a certain, let's say we all agree with a certain set of projections, right? We have to make an assumption there. We're not saying that, well, my projections are way better than your projections or anything like that, right? If we just say that we have the numbers on all the players, and we're not refuting any of that, there would be no reason to play anything less than the median optimal the more it's duplicated. Because it's the same conversation that I just had with the 4 out of 6 type of thing. It's like as the lineups get more duplicated, the unique lineups gain less and less equity in the contest because it pays out the top 5 and you get paid the same amount in the top 5 regardless. Mm-hmm. So the equity that you retain, if everyone was unique in the contest and it was a $2 50-50 or something like that, or whatever, a dollar 50-50. If everyone had a unique lineup and they all were equal, right, in projection and whatever, the equity that you would have is a dollar is 80 cents, right? Is 90 cents, right? Yep. That would be your equity minus 10% because of the rake, right? If 2 of us duplicated, the 2 people that duplicated would have, assuming that all lineups are equal, would have slightly more equity. And all the other lineups would have slightly less. If it's duped 3 times, we get more. If it's duped 6 times, right? It's like we're guaranteed to at least tie 6 ways for 5th place. Of course, you're going to lose money, but your equity is actually higher, right? If all 10 of us have the same lineup, yes, our total equities, we're going to lose money in the long run to rake, but our equity can't, as long as we continue to duplicate, our equity can't go down, right? It always just goes up and up and up from that. This is obviously assuming that all the lineups are equal, assuming that we're all dealing with the same exact projections. So in theory, the more duplicated a lineup is in the 50-50, assuming it is the top projected lineup, the more equity you retain. So if you knew in a 10-man 50-50, if you knew that 3 other people were playing the top projected lineup, there would be no incentive to play a lower projected lineup, assuming that we agree on the projections whatsoever. It's non-exploitable. Because as long as we agree on the projection, now if you don't agree on the projections, then then it's a different story. So let's say the extreme example, Neil, of it's a 10-man 50-50, and 9 people are using the same exact lineup. But that lineup is 20 points lower projected than the median optimal. If you were the unique lineup, should you just play the median optimal that's 20 points higher projected than a duplication of 9? Well, the answer is yes. Because even though, like we said before, well, I thought the duplication raises your equity. I said, yeah, if everything is being equal. But if that's the shittiest lineup in the contest, now, as long as you have a higher projected lineup in comparison to the amount of duplication, you get the equity. So, like, for instance, in the case of that 10-man 50-50, if you don't agree on the projections, let's say I'm using my own projections, and I know that 5 people in the contest are using the bat optimal, and I look at the bat optimal, and the bat optimal projects for whatever, and my projections shows the bat optimal as 6 points lower. Well, 6 points in projection is worth how much duplication? Let's say in that 10-man 50-50, only 2 people were playing the bat optimal. And mine, I believe, is 6 points higher projected. It would be better off, like, should I get on the dupe train? Should I go to duplication station or play my which will be unique because I only have my own projections to go by. I mean, it would be beneficial. Sport, right. But let's say my projections had the bat optimal, like, beats the bat optimal by 1 point out of 120. And the bat optimal was going to be duped 7 times in that 50-50. That 1 point in projection probably wouldn't make up for the 7 dupes. No. That raises, my equity would still be under 90 cents in that contest for a 1 point projection difference, median wise, in my lineup. But if my projection was 10 points, then I believe that I beat that lineup, way more, like 60-70% of the time. That would be worth it to just play my unique lineup. So like those levers of that duplication in a cash contest work that way. So in that hypothesis that in Brick's Discord of like, is it exploitable to play the median optimal line? Should you be just playing the median optimal no matter what, even if it's duplicated? Or is it exploitable? Like in a non-progressive payout structure contest, if you can't find a lineup that beats it often enough to be worth the duplication, then it's much better to just be on that lineup, right? From an equity standpoint, sure. Right?
So I assumed that he was talking about head-to-heads in the sense of like one-on-one, where duplication isn't a factor. Doesn't come.
Well, of course it's a factor, right?
I guess, yeah. But then you're going to be, if you just play the same lineup, you're going to lose every time.
Well, you're gonna get the rate refunded. You're gonna have 0. If we both Neil, if we both agree on the projections, if we both agree, and I know that my opponent will be playing the top optimal median lineup, and we agree that is the best lineup, that will give you a minimum of 90 cents of equity. If I play a lineup that has a slightly less win probability versus that lineup, how is it possible for me to exploit that person?
Yeah, so I agree with you. So I've been sitting here trying to wrap my brain around it. So I never actually got through their entire conversation. So to be candid, I need to go back and read the whole thing. So yes, if it has a lower win probability, I agree with you, but that isn't necessarily the same thing as having a lower median, right? Because maybe it is. I'm thinking of scenarios where, like, okay, it kind of depends on the clumping of the outcomes too. Like if the clumping is right around that median or further out, there could be scenarios.
Yeah, but we're going by the pure median out. I mean, we're going by the median outcome. So let's say we played this, and we're only doing one-on-one. So like, if we played this out 1 million times, and we say that here are the median outcomes of both lineups, like it should, based on infinity, like one lineup will win 50.1% of the time, and the other lineup will be 49.9% of the time, which means like how do I exploit that in that structure of a contest? If we move on to a progressively payout structure, then it's totally exploited. Then we go to the other. Then we go to where duplication hurts you, right? But in those in formats where at least 50% when it's not progressive, like there's no reason, as long as you agree on the projections, that you shouldn't be playing the top median. You shouldn't be playing. If you knew that everyone was playing the same lineup, like you should just not play the contest. Like being unique is not exploitable in that payout structure. Now, where it is exploitable is when people play those same lineups in 3-mans, 5-mans, 10-man, when the top 3 payout. In a progressive payout structure, because a lot of people just like, I'm going to play my cash lineup and I'm going to play it in everything, and they don't adjust for any of that. Now you want them to duplicate. Now, if I'm in if I play a 10-man that pays the top 3, right, pays 50, 30, 20, right, for the top 3, 50%, 30%, 20%. Anytime a lineup gets duplicated, the equity actually goes to equally to all the other lineups, right? Because now you can't win 50%. You have to split 50 and 30 and 30 and 20 and 20 and 0. So, like, if you knew that lineups would be duplicated in a 10-man top 3 payout, it makes you more. If you knew that, oh, this guy and this guy will have the same lineup, and you knew exactly what that lineup was, you would do whatever it takes to not play that lineup, assuming that the projection difference between that lineup and the next best lineup is still past the duplication point. So let's say that duplicated lineup, this never happens in DFS, but let's just say it's duped. There's one lineup duped that's going to be duped twice in a contest, and the next best lineup is 7 points lower projected. Like, maybe then it's better to just be the 3-way dupe, because that lineup is just the unique lineups that are outside of that are just so much lower win probability. But we don't see that even in NBA. We don't even see that. You're going to find that the top 10 optimals are not that drastic, or within a half a point of projection difference. Yeah. That one dupe out of 10, a 2-way, is not worth even playing the top optimal lineup. So like in that 10-man top 3, if I knew that I could aggregate all the NBA projections and know that, yeah, a lot of people are playing this optimal, right? And here's these 8 players in a lineup, and I know that at least it's going to be duplicated twice, I should just X that lineup out and go to the next one. And if I think that lineup's going to be duplicated twice, I go, like, what's the highest projected lineup that's not going to be duplicated? That would have the highest amount of equity in that progressive payout structure contest. And the smaller the contest is, the more effect it has. If this is a 30,000 person contest, duplicating is bad in that also, right? Having one dupe, but not as dramatic as having, like, if one, in a 10-man contest, your equity is 10%, right? So if it's duplicated, now your equity in total is 20% combined by 2 people. In a 1,000-person contest, that's like 200 lineups, right? So one entry in a 10-person contest is the equivalent of 100 entries in a 1,000-person contest. And imagine being duplicated 100 times in a 1,000-person contest. That doesn't sound all too good. So I could understand, Neil, that if you know that people will be playing those types of lineups in small field, 3-mans, 5-mans, 10-mans, 20-mans, 50-mans, 100-mans, that you would automatically gain equity by playing a lineup that is slight, as long as it's not 10 points lower projected. It would be much more, if you knew in a 10-man contest that 3 people were going to play the top opt, and we all agreed on projections, let's say. That if I knew that three people were going to play the top optimal, 3 other people were going to play the second optimal, and 3 other people were going to play, the third optimal, the fourth optimal is the most profitable lineup you could possibly play, right?
I mean, if it's a 20 point projection,
right? I'm talking about in the case in realistic situations,
Yeah. Okay.
the difference between these lineups are less than 1 point.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to say I intuitively agree with everything that you're saying. I'm just because I don't have a math background. I'm like, am I missing something here? When he tells me that maybe it's not optimal because it can be exploited, playing the optimal, I'm like, I'm trying to think of scenarios how it could be exploitable, because it's like in my mind I'm like, well, any pivot you make is going to be pivoting off the optimal, so it's going to be you're losing value by pivoting off of the top median lineup. So I'm intuitively, I definitely agree with you. I'm trying to think through why that could not be the case, because I know that the people who are having this conversation have much more math background than I do. So
And let's start thinking about exploitative in other ways. Like, it's obviously exploitative if you don't agree with that line. I mean, like, if I knew,
for sure.
if I knew my opponent was playing X lineup, if you just told me, Neil, that in today's baseball slate you're playing a cash lineup, or for whatever reason, you're playing cash contests, and you tell me your lineup, you literally at 10 minutes before lock go, this is the lineup that I'm playing against you, and I look at my projections, and it's my projections say that this the other lineup is optimal. Like, I'm just going to play the lineup that's better than yours. I mean, like, why wouldn't I? And then if the lineup that comes up is the same as yours, like, what? I don't understand what incentive, if that is the best lineup in a million scenarios that wins more than 50% of the time versus any lineup that I could choose. Like, how could I exploit that unless it's exploiting late news, right? In NBA, if it's like, if I know that you're going to play a certain lineup and there's late news that could change the projections, and let's say you're playing a lineup that fills the small forward spot with some $9,600 player, even though we don't know whether or not so-and-so is going to play.
Anthony Davis is going to be out.
Right, or something like that, which will make this other lineup better than yours. Then, of course, I could see how that's exploitable. But that would be exploitable regardless of only because the lineup that could potentially beat yours is higher. It becomes, we both have the same projections, and you're just using the 7 o'clock version of it, and I'm using the better 9 o'clock version, taking on the chance that late swap that you can't do anymore. Like, that, to me, that's not even the question that we're even posing here. We're posing that none of that, that's exploitative, but it's not exploitative based solely on the median projection of the lineup. Because like, we could take a look, I mentioned it on the show, the 3-man collusion. Are the way that you collude in 3-mans, if you knew what one opponent, if you were in collusion with your friend, if me and you, Neil, we're going to sit in a 3-man, right? It's going to be me and you and some other guy. And if that some other guy joins, and we knew what his lineup was, or her lineup was, if we knew, if that person, like, oh, this is someone that just plays the Osimo optimal NBA lineup or something like that, okay? And let's say let's just say the top 3 projected lineups are within 0.1 of each other, right? Or something like that. But we knew the first guy was most likely going to play one of the top 2 lineups, right? So what should we do? I play 1, you play 2, and as long as the third person dupes with one of us, we split his equity, because duping in a 3-man negates because it's a progressively payout contest. It's winner take all for a 3-man. So the unique lineup gains the equity from the duped lineup. And in a 3-man especially, there's going to be no duped lineup that, like, dude, if the guy ends up playing a lineup that's 5 points lower projected and neither of us do, we gain the equity on that, right? Both of us, because the lineup has much less of a win probability than that. So that's how collusion happens in 3-mans, where
I've struggled with that concept before, but that makes sense now that you
right. So the whole goal for me and you is to make sure that at least one of us dupe. Now, obviously, we don't want to be the dupe, right? So me and you can't play the same lineup, because if that guy plays a different lineup, then he's getting the equity that we
have to know what each other are doing too.
Right. We have to know what each other are doing and make sure on no circumstance do we play the same lineup. But our goal ultimately is to do we don't even have to care about the projection of our lineups, whatsoever, as long as one of us dupes him,
Yep.
we split the remaining equity. As long as we're working off the same bankroll or whatever, in the
Right.
long run, if we play out these $100 three-mans like every day, we'll just be splitting. Yes, we're not winning a ton of money, but we're winning a little. We're splitting that equity of the third guy by being duped every single day as much as possible. In a 5-man, it works out the same way. It's a little bit more risky. As long as you could dupe with one of the other people, as long as one of you dupes with like a 3-man train or something, you gain the unique lineup that's left gains all of the equity. And if you could predict, especially with the sources that we have out there, right, with RG and with stochastic, right, like if you aggregate ones together, like you could figure out. I mean, you could keep track, and you could keep track. You could go in your 3-mans and go,
yeah, this guy always plays
this right,
yeah.
And then you go, okay, between the two of us, one of us has to play that lineup, and one of us has to play the second highest project, or whatever. Even if our projections are all, let's say we don't agree on the projections, like me and you agree on the projections, but the third person doesn't, right? So it's like, oh, well, that guy's going to be playing a lineup that's 3 points, that let's say 2 points, ends up being, he's playing the 20th optimal, right? But it's only like a point or two lower projected than ours. It would still be better off for me to play the top projected optimal and you to play his lineup.
Yeah.
Right? If we knew that this source, oh, he goes to ETR and plays the ETR NFL optimal, right? Doesn't play the aggregate, doesn't play whatever, just like, he just plugs in, he has an ETR logo or whatever like that, plays $100 3-mans, always plays the most likely, plays what me and you should be doing is I play the Blitz optimal, you play the ETR optimal, dupe him, and then we split everything.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm explaining how exactly why that 3-man collusion happens. Now, if you're playing against a guy, or a girl, whatever, I have to say that. You know what I mean. You're playing against a person that is totally unpredictable on what they're going to play. Like, most likely, you're playing against probably a weaker player anyway,
True.
And you probably win more often. One of the two of you win first place more often than that third guy anyway, so you're probably fine with that as well, even if you can't predict. But most of the time, if you're playing in the 3-man lobby in regular daily sports, you're either finding randos that you probably have an edge on, or you're finding people that always play the same thing. Or always play one of the two, like it's like, oh, it's one of these 2 lineups, or one of these 3 lineups, or one of these 4. And most likely, more often than not, one of you two could duplicate, as long as you're colluding between the two, that you never play the same lineup. So that's why a big red flag, it doesn't prove anything, but it is a red flag, a signal that if you play 2 people, let's say you play you play 3-mans and you play head-to-heads, and both of these 2 people are in the lobby playing both of those types of contests. If you see that you're playing player A in head-to-heads and they have the same lineup as player B in head-to-heads, yet player A and player B in your 3-mans never have the same lineup, that's
not a good sign.
That's suspicious. Does it necessarily prove anything? No, but it's a pretty fucking big red flag. That if they always have different lineups in 3-mans and the same lineup in head-to-heads.
And this is the evidence that people have against certain pros.
Okay. Yes. This is the red, like, it's kind of to me it's obvious. Like, why else would you be doing that? But I could understand, this is why you can't prove it completely. I could understand having different, because I promote this, that depending on the contest you're in, you should have different types of lineups. So if you're playing a single entry 100-man contest, you should have a different lineup than your cash lineup. You should have a different lineup for triple ups than you do for double ups. So it's possible that these 2 people, like, always have different lineups. Like, I have my head-to-head lineup, I have my 50-50 lineup, I have my 3-man lineup, I have my 5-man lineup, and because they have different lineups for different contests, that one of them will have a different lineup. But it's a red flag when it's always... Like, even if you were doing that independently, and go, well, I'm going to play this in head-to-heads and this in three-mans, they would overlap often enough in three-mans because they're not talking to each other. So it's like the type of thing, it's like, okay, well, I want to play the top optimal in head-to-heads and the second optimal in three-mans. Well, there's going to be some days where both players play the same in three-mans thinking that way because of the combinations that are available.
Okay, but what if one of those people, so they both, both people play the top optimal in head-to-heads. Right. And independently, they both come to different conclusions. One of them decides, I'm just going to play the same lineup in three-mans because I think that it's the top optimal, I'm going to win. The other one decides, I think it's better EV to play the number 2 optimal in a three-man because other people too often play the top optimal and I can gain leverage on them by playing
right. And if right, but Neil,
so it could happen independently.
Right, but it could happen independently, but after a while, after not much of a while, you will check your three-mans and go, well, this guy is doing this, so why don't I play the guy that's playing the top optimal, for instance, is noticing that the third guy in the contest is also playing the top optimal too often that he's being duped. So you know what that person does? Adjust by playing the second optimal, which is what the second guy is already doing, and then they're duped. And then you'll be like, well, now I need to play the third optimal because the first guy, you have to avoid being duped at all costs. But the fact that third level isn't happening, means that how is it not that the two people are talking to each other? Because eventually, either you're going to end up playing the third or fourth or fifth lineup. Either that happens, or they end up duping each other off because they make the same choice. It's like rock, paper, scissors. Eventually, you're going to have rock, right? Right. So or you're going to be throwing, the sixth option that doesn't exist, rock, paper, scissors, because you're always trying to not duplicate the other guy. So the fact that neither of those are happening, that's the red flag of, you're right. They could independently come to that. But after 100 slates, how likely...
losing money every time I do a three-man with this other guy.
Right.
Or, the long run I am, so I need to adjust, is what you would probably do. And these are high-level players, so they probably would adjust if that was necessary.
Right. And I'm not bringing the collusion stuff up to talk about collusion as a topic. I'm just using that as an example of why duplication, how that affects cash games versus progressive, but non-progressive versus progressive payout contests where and this is where people go wrong, right? You see Twitter complaints of oh, these two guys played 150 lineups and they both played similar, you could tell that they both played similar lineups. And it's oh, they talk to each other and look at how many lineups dupe with one another, right? And I go, well, you're an idiot because it's a progressive payout. You want them to do that, right? They could tell you. Someone could tell me, hey, me and my buddy, we're going to get together and we're going to make the same 150 lineups. We're going to collude and make the same, dude, you're doing work. You could tell me that and I'd say, please go do it. The problem comes in is if me and you, Neil, play 150 lineups and we purposely don't do it. We purposely. Now, obviously, there's a baseball slate even with 8 games. There's so many combinations. Who gives a shit at that point? But let's say in a very small type of thing, if I say on an MMA slate, I'm going to play all of these unique combinations that have all these two fighters, and I have 100% of them, right, of these two fighters, and then your exposures are 0% of those two fighters and all the other combinations, and we never overlap, that would be more of an unfair advantage. Even though there's still so many more lineups, it's not as much of an advantage as you think it is, but at least that, if you bring up that at least is a case. But the problem is that independently, it's quite possible that we came to those conclusions completely separate from one another. Sure. Is it a red flag? Yes. Is it proof? No. But if that happens 20 slates in a row, most likely you got them, right? Type of thing. But duplicating one another in GPPs is not you would want people to collude that. Please,
and that's what people accuse the Chipotle brothers of doing, is they collude because they sometimes land on the same lineups, and it's I don't think they're cheating.
No, actually,
just
that makes
playing.
it the case that they're not colluding.
Exactly, yeah.
Because they wouldn't want to duplicate with each
Funny
other.
accusation.
Right, and then also people come up with the opposite, and they go, "Oh, here's a slate that it's a 5-game MLB slate, and they have no duplicated lineups between the two of them." And you know what my argument is always? I played lineups, and I didn't duplicate with them either. So, like,
Right.
am I colluding with Chipotle Addict? No. The only reason that you're pointing out these two users is because you know they're related to each other.
Right.
But, like, if it wasn't, like, take a look at any random user, and there's enough lineups available that most users aren't going to duplicate lineups with one another as much as you think. So simply the fact that they don't have any duplication isn't like this like magic bullet that like that's proof.
In
Now,
most sports, most slates, duplicating is not actually that big of an issue.
Right.
We talk about it a lot because it's a big issue in MMA and NFL Showdown and certain sports and contests, but in general in baseball, it's not something I'm that concerned about on a typical slate. I'm still trying to get different, but it's not because I'm trying to not dupe. It's because you gain more equity by being more different than, you don't want to have 1v1s versus a lot of people either.
Right. But I also wanted to bring this up because of the cash, because a lot of people don't talk about duplication when it comes to cash games. Right? So that was that conversation in
It's an interesting
Rick's
conversation.
Discord.
Something I don't think about much since I don't play cash games. But yeah, that is. I've never fully understood the issue with the 3-mans. Now I think I'm grasping it better after that explanation. That's interesting. You also just sort of touched on a timely topic. I don't know if that was intentional. Talking about the colluding to have 300 unique lineups and having one player locked in one set or different players. So for example, in NFL, you could have 300 lineups where you have 150 set that has a certain set of quarterbacks and a different 150 set with a completely different set of 150 quarterbacks.
Right.
Which is what the accusation is related to Tanner and Jade. Timely because Tanner just won another milli yesterday.
Right, in golf, I saw.
In golf,
it's not as much of it. Is it an advantage? Like it's one of these things of scale. That's a better way of putting it. Because I think too many people think in black and white and go, they have a humongous advantage or they don't have any advantage, and it's not the case. So like in the PGA Millie Maker, having an extra 100, if they allowed you to build 300 lineups, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, if you're building bad lineups, actually, it's worse for you, right?
Yeah.
But let's say it's sharp players. If they were allowed to build 300 lineups, how much more of a percentage of those lineups are in that? How many people were in that contest? I mean, that's what a contest with 200,000 entries or something,
yeah,
right?
Ridiculous. Yep.
So what if 100? Like, let's say 250,000 entries. 200,000 entries are in the contest. I want to put that in. How many is 150 of them? 0.00075. Okay, so we adjust that. That's 1% of 200,000 is 2,000. Okay, so it's a fraction of 1% worth of the con. So multiply that by 2.
Right.
So instead of having
Still a fraction of 1%.
Right, instead of having 3/4, not even 0.75%. It's 1/4%. 0.75%. Now you have double that. Right?
Yeah.
Like how many more lineup? I mean,
You don't have that many lineups.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is it if you're building plus EV lineups and you're putting in another 150 plus EV lineups, is it an advantage over people that you're taking the place of negative EV lineups that other people could be putting in? So is there a negative impact on your own lineups? Yes, there is.
Yeah.
By a marginal extent. So for me to say that, because I don't want to say no, there's no advantage. Or no, it does not affect you. It does affect you by about this much. In the 3-man contest we were talking about before, that's like egregiously affects you. Right. Way more. Or the fact that people don't make overlapping lineups or whatever. Like, if it was a contest, let's say it was a 10-man contest, and 2 people played complementary lineups, one of each, right? That would be more impactful than playing an extra 150 into a 200,000 person contest, right? So if me and you, Neil, if we went into a 10-man, right? Let's say a 10-man in baseball for whatever. We'll just use baseball as an example or something like that. And we said, we're going to split the money. We have 2 entries into this contest. Let's just say it's winner take all to make it easy. And I said to you, I'm going to stack the Blue Jays. And then you're going to go, okay, since you're stacking the Blue Jays, I'm not going to touch the Blue Jays. I'm going to stack the Cardinals. Like, does that give us an advantage rather than you possibly duplicating something that I'm doing? Yes, it does. And especially does in a 10-man contest because the duplication factor matters more. Like, it matters more because we each make up 10% of the lineups, not 0.0075% of the lineups. How much of an advantage, quote unquote, how much of a disadvantage do the other 8 players in the contest have? Less, but not dramatic, but still less enough that in a 10-man contest, you wouldn't want 2 people making complementary decisions with each other. But that's so much more than 150 extra lineups into a 200,000 person contest. So that, to me, the clarification is that does it put other players at a disadvantage? Very slightly. Is it enough so that you should be, oh my God, let's hang the guy type of? Probably not. Right. And also, most of the people that would be doing it would have to be in relation to their skill set. So if I knew that my buddy, if some buddy I know here in Louisville says, I'm going to build 150 lineups, and I know that they build horrible lineups, right? And it's like, well, good luck. Thank you for entering your bad lineups. I'm gonna. My other buddy here, he's gonna put in 150 also, and we're gonna split it. And I know that he's putting in minus EV lineups. I want that, right? Now all of a sudden it's like, yes, they're colluding and building complement. You play this stack, I play that stack. You play this pitcher, I play that pitcher. And they're still building lineups that are 30 points lower projected and too high owned.
Right.
I welcome you. Please build more of a syndicate. Please collude between 10 people and build bad lineups. That's perfectly fine with me. So it's more of the instance of the better the player is, the more of a disadvantage and still we're talking about very small margins. So you first with Tanner, for instance, you would have to first off go, do I think Tanner is a good player? And do I think how much more of a good player is he that an extra 150 lineups affects me enough? So the combination of the two, it's quite possible that if you believe both, then it affects you very little. It affects you like this much. It does affect you, but very little.
Yep.
And if you believe that Tanner's a horrible player, it actually affects you positively. So it's like you would want that to happen. Please still have your wife play. Do what have your quote unquote wife play. So the only way that it makes any sense to care is if you believe both things. And if you do, it's like that's why you don't see why don't you see me complaining about it, or you complain, or any 150 maxer doesn't complain. You don't see them complaining about it. The only thing that I would complain about is optics. Yeah, that's what I've always said to that casual players may not understand how marginal of a difference it makes, but it may prevent them from playing the contest. And I don't want bad players, recreational players, to stop playing. So that's the main reason why I've even told, like, the VIP, whatever, VOP committee doesn't exist anymore. They disbanded that, so whatever. But in there, we would always make, like, lineup sellers. Like, to me, as a sharp player, lineup sellers are typically bad players. They're not horrible players, but they're not good, right? So I don't care. In GPP, sell all the lineups you want. I want people to duplicate. You're a fucking idiot then, right? But even in cat and double ups or cash games or whatever, head to heads, feel free to do it. Like, I'm going to be better than the lineup sellers, so I don't care if these people are duplicated. But to casual people, when they see the same avatar, when they see the Roto Radar avatar 4 times with the same score in all their in their contests. Even in GPP, where it's negative, where it actually benefits them, they go, "Oh, these people are cheating," right?
Yeah.
They don't even think, right? In cash games, you do get an equity benefit, like we described before, but in GPPs they don't. But the optics turns off casual, recreational, bad, under, above, less than average players, and I want more of them to play. So I don't want the optics to be bad.
Right.
So to me, that situation is all, to me, an optics thing. But from a mathematical perspective, it doesn't affect, even if it did affect me, it doesn't affect the field enough that I should give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I was thinking about it yesterday, like what the person who gets second. I'm sure the person who gets second in this one, if they know about the past with Tanner, is going to be upset that he was not banned. I actually went and read the DraftKings terms of service, and they're like, yeah, we have the right to, not pay out your money, or, we have the right at our discretion to do such and such. So there's nothing in the terms of service saying we're going to ban you from playing.
Right. Ultimately, the terms of service of all of these sites and all these services, eventually you'll get to a paragraph where it basically says we could do whatever the hell we want.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. We reserve the right.
I don't think there's any real action that you can take that's going to actually work out for you.
Right. But optically, if you are proven by the sites, DraftKings, FanDuel, to be multi-accounting, and that you shouldn't be, truthfully, you shouldn't be allowed to play anymore.
Right.
I mean, to me, I think that's not a controversial opinion.
You're breaking the rules in a way that does, even if it's still negatively affecting all the other players.
And the fact that it's in your terms, that's the fact that it's in your terms of service.
Yeah.
If it's not, like, a lot of people quote the community guidelines.
Right.
Community guidelines ain't the terms of service. That's why the term guide, like, I would love the community guidelines to be the terms of service, but it's not. Right? Yeah. So but in the terms of service, you cannot operate 2 accounts at the same time. That is literally in the terms of service. But you can make a case, like, I don't want to feel, I feel like I'm a defense attorney here. You can make the case that in order to prove that you are multi-accounting, that they would have to prove that it was not your wife or your whoever, the second person that has that account, that didn't physically do it.
Right.
Right? So like, oh, well, the IP addresses are the same. Well, you're living in the same house. Right?
Same computer.
Right. So like you would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, or at least preponderance of the evidence, that not only that because this is for multi-accounting, because the complementary lineups, that's in the community guidelines. So community guidelines are worth about nothing. I mean, like, It's there. This is what we our guidelines, whether or not we adhere to it. You don't have to agree to it. You don't have to click a box to agree to it. It's just there. The terms of service, you have to click a box to agree on. So at least from that standpoint, you can't run 2 accounts at the same time. But the site would have to prove that you're running both and I guess there's enough ways of saying, like, well, how do you not, that if me and my wife doesn't play DFS. Let's say she sets up an account, marry whoever you want, right? That's the name of her account, right? And she puts in whatever lineups in, like, she's in the head-to-head lobby, right? And me and her are playing the same exact lineup because it's really my lineups. Yep. And she doesn't have an experience badge, so people are scooping up her games like there's no tomorrow. And then what's the difference from a terms of service perspective of if I were to log into her account and put the lineup that I'm playing in my account lineup in, that could be using 2 accounts. But what happens if I never log into her account at all? And my wife is in the bedroom with her computer, and I say, honey, put this lineup in. How would you ever be able to prove that?
Right.
Like, how would you, like, she is putting it in, and the only thing that I'm breaking is the community guideline of basically making a complementary strategy between two people off on the side and sharing a bankroll, that type of thing. But we're not operating. I've never logged into her account. I've never touched anything. She makes the withdrawals. She uploads the CSV or whatever. She's like, I don't touch. I may tell her what to do, which is against the community guideline, but not against the terms of service. It doesn't say in the terms of service that you can't tell someone else what to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. Right?
Yeah, it might.
It might. Well, maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong.
You're probably right. You're probably in the community guidelines. I actually, as we're having this conversation, I think that what I read earlier might have been the community guidelines instead of the terms of service, just because that was the quickest way I found. I spent about 2 minutes on it just to kind of see what it said. I think I might have been reading the community guidelines, but I'm not sure.
Right.
They were both under the same. There were tabs for both of them.
Right, but all I'm claiming is that even though they say community guidelines, that doesn't mean it. I mean, it doesn't mean. Truthfully, the terms of service.
You what they want you to do.
Right. Truthfully, the terms of service doesn't mean anything because you eventually get to a paragraph that says, no matter what you read above this, we could do whatever the hell we want anyway. Yeah. So even if, let's say, DraftKings said we could let someone multi-account, like you couldn't sue them over it because it says in the terms of service they could do whatever they want anyway, and if they want to allow people to multi-account, they can. Yeah. And if they want certain people to multi-account and other people not to, they can also. Like, eventually that paragraph makes them not liable for anything anymore. And you'd have to somehow, there's some tort law or some. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but maybe there's a lawsuit from that. But I mean, I didn't want this conversation to talk about collusion necessarily. Right. But yes, I guess it came up to some extent.
It's pretty timely. I figure we had to at least talk about whether you had an issue with it or what, to what extent you think anything should be done. I mean, at this point, do you believe that Tanner should be banned from playing because it was pretty clearly caught cheating the last time, I would say.
Right. No, I think I optically, yes, but as a player, no.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
Okay.
That's
a better way.
Playing those. Yeah.
If it's going to prevent recreational players from playing more, then it should be banned. If it's gonna make him play more, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
I think that's a better way of putting it. I have no problem with him playing.
Yeah.
And you could infer whatever you want from that. Anything.
Yeah, I'm not going to spell it out for anybody what you're saying either. Yeah. What if you had gotten second in this contest?
Me personally?
So, I mean, the second place. Yeah. What if you personally had gotten second? How would you feel in that case? Would you maintain the same outlook?
Intellectually, I would have to. But I would have to but the thing is, Neil, I would have to calculate the EV of, like, to me, it's infinite EV to complain. Right? You understand what I'm saying? Like, if I don't complain, if I do literally nothing, if it's 1 million to first and 100,000 a second, and I came in second for 100,000, like, if I say nothing, I win $100,000. If I say anything and it possibly has any probability of causing first place to get voided and me to get $1 million, that's an extra $900,000 to me. So it really comes down to a cost benefit of time analysis of how do I increase my probability of getting the extra $900,000 by complaining, getting a lawyer, doing any of that.
How much money and effort are you willing to put into it to get something out of it?
Right. But simply spending 3 seconds to tweet, I have infinite EV because what's the worst case scenario? I mean, worst case scenario, it's just I stay. Best case scenario is I get an extra $900,000.
Right.
So just from like that's how my brain works. Like you thinking about how would you feel, and it's like. Like, I'm willing to accept anything. That lineup won. I don't think he should have been allowed to play, but I can't make that decision now or anything like that. But, hey, if I could get him kicked off and I could win the $1 million, like I would do that even if I believed that he should be playing. I mean, like, even if just like I said before, hey, I don't mind him playing all the, like, dude, I could have said for 2.5 years, let him play. I want him to play all the contests. And then he plays this one, I get second. I'd be the first one to say, ban the motherfucker and ban him retroactively and give me, because from a monetary perspective, it would be more in my benefit. Even though it's like, well, didn't you say for 2.5 years he's fine? You have to live by that. It's like, I don't have to. Like, there's $900,000 at stake. I'll change my mind right now.
Right. In this case, it was only 750. Second place is actually.
Oh, okay, that's so different now.
Not as bad.
That's not worth it anymore.
Right. Who cares at that point? You still won 250. Yeah. No, I think I have the same kind of mindset. Yeah.
But it still feels optically, it looks pretty bad for fucking DraftKings. That literally they stripped that nothing ever came out of what the monetary value. All you know, is that they didn't make him the first place winner, and they moved everyone up a spot. It doesn't mean that
probably paid him out.
Right. It doesn't mean that he didn't get the $1 million. He's not credited, right? But who gives a shit about that? Like, well, he technically did not win that contest. But hey, if someone wants to give me $1 million for not winning a contest, I'm more than welcome to lose.
Yeah, it looks bad for DraftKings. You know who else it looks bad for? DFS professionals. We put all this time and effort. This is our every day. We're talking about this stuff. We're theorizing, putting in all this effort, and none of us are winning two. Somebody told Bobby Gomes told me this is his third milli maker that he's won. This fucking random bachelor guy can just easily win 3 millis, making us look bad.
What was his other one?
According to Bobby Gomes, he thinks that he won one on FanDuel a while back.
Okay, well, we're not sure.
I don't know if it's true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he wasn't totally sure. He said, I think he won one on FanDuel as well.
Right. Well, when you have 750,000 lineups, then I guess that's right. Who knows if that's profitable?
Unfair. Yeah.
Maybe we're all figment. Maybe Neil, it's me, you, and the rest of the world is Tanner Tolbert cloned, and like we're the only real people.
We're Tanner Tolbert clones, and we're the only real people.
No, we're the real people, and everyone else is a duplicate.
Just you and I. You and I are the only real people. Or everybody else. Okay.
Truthfully, I think I'm the only real person, and maybe you're.
Yeah, I'm probably a duplicate too.
Right, and you think that I'm a duplicate, right?
Yeah, this is like the Jim Carrey movie, Truman Show.
Right.
Yeah, this is the Truman Show. I'm here to tell you, Jordan. This is the Truman Show.
Oh, it's not a very good show. Who's watching this show? So
he was kind of just going about his daily life.
Anything else? I listened to your past 2 episodes with Whistles and with Warren. As usual with David, you get to hear him talk and not actually gain anything from it because he's not gonna tell you.
He doesn't share all that much,
right? Which is normal. But I mean, he's as personable as he could. I mean, he's not adversarial, but he doesn't mind talking about like playing DFS, but like he's not gonna. No one's gonna tell you exactly what they're doing, especially when they're doing it from a programming standpoint. I think the biggest thing that came out of that conversation, I think the biggest teaching point, as well as just in general, that David utilizes ownership more than he did in the past. Because I remember his first interview from like 2 years ago or something.
On Lulz.
On Lulz, where essentially says he has an ownership module that he doesn't like. And he said on your show that originally he was like, well, if I have the best optimization, why should I care what anyone else is doing? And he pretty much said on the show that, yeah, ownership matters a lot more than I used to think it did.
Yeah.
How he utilizes that, he won't tell you, but
no,
because that was the one bugbear that I had with that interview when it's like, oh no, I don't care about ownership whatsoever, and I'm like it's you have to care what your opponents are doing. Like it's a peer-to-peer game to some extent. Maybe there's some quote unquote game theory optimal, which I hate. Obviously, we both hate using that term, right? Then we get into that nerdy tenor side of like, you do have to care what the other people are doing, but you don't know where their mistakes are. You're just going to do this, and it's going to, over the long run, take into account all their mistakes. Right? That exploitative versus balanced type of argument, which is nearly impossible to play balanced.
Yeah. I think I said on this show, I don't remember, but I think Brick was he wasn't wasn't calling me specifically, but I was the one who kept bringing that up on the shows because we had that conversation with Brick and the Nerdy Tenor about the exploitative versus balance. So they like kind of introduced me to the concepts, and then I kept asking people that, and then eventually, they had that conversation on Lols, and it was like, yeah, but nobody's actually playing GTO, which I think is true because it's kind of impossible to. For most of us, it's impossible to make GTO lineups. We just don't have like the mechanisms by which we play. We can't figure out which lineups are actually GTO, which was that was an interesting conversation. But yeah, I felt like I needed to ask him, and that he's one of the rare that I asked him whether it has evolved over time, whether he uses ownership, because that was also something that stuck out to me. Was that conversation on Lols where he said, yeah, I don't really factor in ownership. And then he went off and Brick and Pete kept on talking. And Brick was like, well, that's just wrong. Like he just like called him out, essentially saying like, it's wrong to say ownership doesn't matter. So I was like, I don't totally buy it that he doesn't factor in ownership. So I thought it was worth getting back into that conversation a little bit. And then I also asked him about duplicates, because I think he had said on Lols that he doesn't really worry about duplicates. And he was also a little bit, I think, confused about what they meant. And by that, multiple of the same lineup himself, as opposed to like being duplicated by the field. So I brought that up again, and I believe he said that he doesn't really factor it in that much, which kind of surprised me. I don't know if we were still not totally on the same page as what we were talking about.
I'm not sure, because the duplication factor for like regular slates versus showdowns versus like matters.
Right.
It's different, but I understand his standpoint of if there were only 28 profitable lineups, if there's only 25 profitable lineups, just play them each 6 times.
Yep.
Like, that would be better than playing unprofitable lineups. Like, that I understand. But my attitude is that if there's only 25 profitable lineups, just play 25 lineups. Because you duplicating yourself doesn't gain you anything more.
Right.
Right? So just play the 25. Like, that technically he's correct, because you're going to take up more of the equity of the prize pool for every more entry that you put in. But with the variance involved in sports, like, good luck figuring out, like, there's only 25 profitable lineups, and you're going to play it, like good luck and then the duplication of those lineups. So I think it's more of the matter with Whistles is that he doesn't start from that. Like, we start from 2 separate ends of the spectrum, right? So there's, like, we'll use MMA as an example because we both play it, or NFL Showdown, whatever. It could be whatever. I come from I first think in terms of how can I find the lesser duplicated lineups, not necessarily the unique lineups, but the lesser duplicated lineups. I don't want lineups that are duplicated 40 times. There's in a realistic sense on any given slate, there's no lineup that is so higher win probability that you can make up for 40 duplicates. Like from a realistic, I could just start eliminating those lineups, right? Because I'm never going to encounter a slate where those lineups, even duplicating 40 times and winning first place and splitting it 40 ways, is plus EV versus other lineups that are only duplicated twice or 3 times or unique or something. So, like, I start from that side of, like, let me get rid of all the combinations that I know I shouldn't play, regardless of their win probability, because they'll never have that high of a win probability. And then once I get rid of that, then I start thinking about what are the best projected then you're optimizing for that and getting plus EV lineups. David, I believe, does the other way of, let me figure out what the top win probability lineups are, and then if I'm playing, like, if I'm not on par with the duplicate, like, he still factors in the duplication, but he'd rather play a lineup that is duplicated 7 times. Let's say, for instance, we're going to use just a pure made-up example. The EV of here's an EV of a lineup, $1.26, right? So you get 26 cents for every dollar. There's $1.26, and it's duplicated, and it's unique. And there's another lineup that's $1.25, and it's duplicated 7 times, right? Only because it comes in, maybe it doesn't win but it comes in the top 100 more often than the unique lineup. It comes in like that $1.26 lineup. Most of that EV comes from when it wins, right?
Yep.
It doesn't really come in any of the other places. So like it either wins or gets you nothing. For 1 cent less in EV, you get a lineup that on average gets you 25 cents. It doesn't win as often, but it comes in the top 1,000 often enough. I'm coming up. There may not be a lineup that exists like this, but it comes up often enough that once you average everything out, it's at $1.25 lineup. And David just chooses to play more of those types of lineups for the sake of variance control, for the sake of diversification in his set, and he doesn't get to those. While someone like Brian Jester is like that $1.26 with one, give me a lot of those types of lineups, and hopefully one of them bubbles up to the top. And if that doesn't happen, minus 90+% on a slate. While David's lineups are more likely to be like when he loses, he's only losing like 40% of his, 20 to 40% of his entries doing that. But when he wins, he wins a lot of 14-way dupes, 10-way dupes, 7-way dupes like that. That if we played this out over 1 million slates, like someone like Brian Jester has slightly more money than him. But David still has plenty of money also because he wins even with a 10-way dupe often enough based on his optimization method. So that's what I believe that David is conceptually doing more of. So when he says he doesn't care about duplication, I don't think there's nothing that's black or white. It's just that that's not the starting point in which he goes from. He goes more from that win probability, that projection-based standpoint. And yes, he'll try not to have lineups that are duped 40 times, but he's not specifically going after high standard deviation unique lineups. And he doesn't mind having a bunch of 5 to 7-way type of lineups, and whatever happens, happens.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm trying to think if that makes more sense or less sense given his massive bankroll at this point. Because he could obviously withstand the forever $1.26 lineups more than most of us could with his bankroll. But at the same time, he doesn't really have the need because he plays so many different sports and contests and has so much money to play that why take on that extra risk if you don't need to?
Right. It's a risk tolerance issue when it comes to that. This is assuming that you're able to calculate the expected value of the lineups.
Right.
Right. Like if you don't have an accurate way of computing that, you're much more likely to run into plus EV lineups when they're unique, when they're duped twice, when they're duped. You understand what I'm saying? Like in MMA, I'm looking to play lineups that have high win probabilities that are under 5 dupes. If I get uniques, I get uniques. That's perfect. Great. I get uniques also. But like I have no way of making all the possible lineups and then coming up with like this lineup that's duped 8 times has the same expected value as this lineup duped 3 times that has the same expect. All I know is that it's like having buckets of marbles, and it's like, well, I know there's a lot of red marbles in this bucket, and I know there's less red marbles in this. I'm just more likely, like, if I care more about the uniqueness, I'm going to run into more plus EV lineups, even though they're high standard deviation lineups. And if I don't care about that, it's quite possible I play 150 lineups and 90 of them are minus EV because they're duplicated too much.
Yep.
Even though David may have some of those lineups, he is more likely to have the 5 to 10 dupe lineups that are actually plus EV, and I'm more likely to have the 5 to 10 dupe lineups that are negative EV. So just in the same way that when you play MMA, you're like, why don't I just cut the salary off at 49.5? That's just a blunt way of, since I have no way of determining 49.6 lineups and above that are unique, it's so much more easy to I'll just find this bucket that has more red marbles in it because I just don't have a way of sorting. I have a way of sorting that out. You don't.
In MMA.
Right, in MMA. But I don't have a way of calculating the EV of certain lineups that have certain combinations of fighters that I deem to have too many average dupes. Like, what I calculate, if you put all these 4 fighters together, there are like 30 combinations of the other 2 fighters, and the average duplication is like 24. That's the average. There may be 2 lineups that are combinations that are unique, and 2 lineups that are duplicated 60 times. It's just the average is 24. But can I find the 2 that are unique? Because if I'm wrong, I find the ones that are duplicated 60 times. So my best way of not getting those lineups are just taking those 4 fighters and saying no more than 3, right? And making a group like that. So like that's my secondary blunt methodology. David, because of his background, has a much more precise way of like, yeah, sometimes I do get that one unique that's 50K that no one else is playing in MMA, or he doesn't play MMA, but I'm just like, those NFL showdown lineups that it's like, here's a lineup that's only duped twice that spent 49.9 on a slate, where you almost look at this and you go, how do you make unique lineups? And yes, I guess there were like 5 lineups, 49.9 plus, that were under 5 dupes, and it just so happened to be this combination. And you look at the combination, and you almost think, like, how is it not dupe? And it just so happens it's because of some correlation thing of like, well, you're playing like 2 running backs and 1 in the captain and no quarterback or something. And it's like, yeah, it's a 49.9 lineup that kind of doesn't make any sense from like a how the game plays out. But shit happens in a low scoring game, and maybe that's optimal. But he has more of a methodology of doing that but most other people don't.
Very few have that, I think. Maybe a dozen. How many DFS players have that kind of capability?
Not many.
Yeah.
And that's what I rely on, the fact that I'm thank God that not many don't. So my directionally accurate methodology is better than most people's no methodology.
That brings up another interesting conversation that you were having yesterday. Justin Freeman posted about how many, he posted asking whether the top 10 players by volume, DFS players by volume, play more or less than $10 million per year. And you were saying that you think that is over 100, which kind of blew my mind. And then I thought about it a little bit more because I'm way less than that. And I am, according to the Rotogrinders volume rankings, I'm a top 100 volume player. But that does. So I think that is why it took me a little bit of to get used to the idea. And then it's like, okay, I guess cash game players and people who play cash games or like lower field contests can get a lot more money down without the same level of risk that I have. So So I guess it makes some sense. The number's still over 100 playing 10 million plus volume kind of blows my mind. But,
yeah, but I mean, 10. The fact that 10,
possible.
that when Justin said 10, I'm like you're not even close. I mean, like 10 million in volume is not as much as you think it is. Now, if you're a lower stake, if you play just the large field stuff, right? Like that's what you're doing, right? So on a $15 150 max contest, you're playing $22.50 worth of volume, right? So even if you're just playing the main slates, let's say you just played 22.50. I know the NFL milli makers are
varies. It's 20
varies, right? But let's just say on average you're playing $22.50, so you're only playing one site, and let's say you just literally play every day. So that'll count when you play the afternoon slate, when you play we're just really ballparking it.
Yeah.
If you did that every day, you'd be $821,250. Okay, if you did that on both sites, you'd be like 1.6 million. Okay, so I could understand if you're just a 150 max player playing NFL Showdown, NFL Main Slate, NFL Afternoon Slate, MLB every day, NBA every day, NASCAR, MMA, PGA. Maybe you're playing round 4 PGA Showdown, like maybe on both sites, on Yahoo, maybe you get 2 million in volume or something like that.
Sounds about right.
For a year, 2 million in volume a year. Yeah, for that. But like that isn't all of DFS. That's the most visible part of those large field contests. But you don't realize that like, I mean, I could open up my app today and go on DraftKings, go to MLB, for instance, go to today's slate, and there's an $888 Mega 8s 15 max contest. There is a Fantasy Baseball World Championship Mega Qualifier for $3,545 with a 2 max. Okay? That's probably going to fill. So that's like, what? 68 people are in there. even if they all have 2 entries, that's still a minimum of 34 people, right? We got a 6-man Thunderdome, an 8-man Thunderdome. We got, $200. Obviously, I'm not counting cash games now. Okay? Then I could go to PGA for the Travelers coming up, go to the tournaments, and there's a $555 27 max. There's a $200 single entry. There's a $134-man $3,000 entry contest, right? So that's a 4 max. There's 134 entries. Even if everyone was a 4 max player, we're still talking about like 30 people for that. And not everyone is a 4 max, right? So like that's probably 50, 60 people there for $3,000 entry. And then we're not even talking about NFL. Dude, you could play $5,000, $10,000, 50-man contests in NFL. So like if you're a high stakes just GPP player, and let's say you're playing on FanDuel, I could open up FanDuel. How much is the monster? How much is if you're playing the 555 15 max, maybe you're playing 4 entries, 5 entries into that. That's $2,500 right there. On top of you 150 maxing.
Right.
Like, dude, if you were just playing Neil, you alone, if you played on 2 sites and just played what you normally play, you'd probably do about $1.5 million worth of volume total. Something like that.
Yeah.
So imagine if you just added the high stakes stuff, you'd probably double that. And that's just for the normal high stakes stuff. Let's say you played also the nosebleeds. Now you're up to 6, 7 million, 8 million. And this is
right.
And this is not even playing every slate. This is not playing cash games at all. And this is just playing high stakes GPPs. I think it's fairly easy to get to 10 million. And these contests are filled. I mean, we're not talking about yet. Yeah, not everyone's playing the Thunderdome, but 8 guys are. If they're playing $5,300 a day, I mean, just playing the Thunderdome on average every day, because they may be playing multiple ones, right? They may be playing on the late slate. Right? So if you do that every day, that's $2 million just on the Thunderdome. And that maybe some people only play the PGA Thunderdome. Some people only play, and if maybe we're talking about that's $2 million of volume just in the Thunderdome. Right. Like literally that's just one contest. So based on all of that, not even accounting for cash games, for $10,000, $5,000 head-to-heads, and you could eat up all the double ups in the lobby for like $5 to $10 grand. Like imagine playing just cash games and you're playing $10 grand a day, which includes like night slates and showdowns. Right. That's already $3.6 million. So if you didn't even play any GPPs, you could play $10 million worth of volume between 2 sites, 3 sites, 4 sites, easily, right? $10,000. I mean, it's so easy to do. Now you combine them both together. How is it on the Roto Grinder standings? The cash game players aren't even there. Right. So
and the small field GPP, I think it has to be at least 100 people in the GPP. So Thunderdome players aren't there either.
Right. So yeah. How is it not 100?
Yeah.
10 million. Now once you get up to 25 million, now we start coming down lower and lower. And once we get someone said, how about the 8-figure players? I'm I think you can count the 8-figure players on one hand.
Yeah.
That are putting in 100 million worth of volume.
That's 9 figures.
9 figures, right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So 7 figures is just 1 million. Yeah. Right? So there's plenty of that. Me, I'm that.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah.
Right? You're that.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then the 8-figure players, there gotta be, I mean, dude, there gotta be 100 of them. Yeah, right? Because I could probably I could go on the road, I could just name, all these guys play much, much higher volume than I do. And then once you get up to McLovin and Utica and Awesome, then now you're talking about 9-figure.
Whistles,
players.
Yeah, probably.
Whistle, right. Now you may, the people that.
But probably a handful.
Right, a handful. But these are the people that are literally playing the entire lobby on every slate, every site, and every sport. right? They're like the 2-game
It's a lot.
turbo NBA slate. They have $5,000 head-to-heads posted for, right? It may not fill, it may right whatever, but I'm just like, we're talking about. That's why I say you could count them on one hand to get 100 million in volume on one hand.
Yeah.
Is it is my number 100? When I say 100 easily, maybe I'm, I think I'm more likely to be that it's over 100 that get at least 10 million in volume in DFS play amongst any site that they play on. We barely count Super Draft or Yahoo because the liquidity is not that great anyway.
Right.
But FanDuel and DraftKings, I mean, look at NFL. Go to the NFL lobby on opening week, and just open up the $1,000 plus head to heads. You're gonna see 20, 30, 40 people. I mean, so if they're willing to play that stakes.
Britt Devine said that he said that there are players who get down $1 million on an NFL Sunday.
Yeah,
and that
the NFL alone on $1 million on an NFL Sunday. That means they make up $10 million like halfway through the season, right? Because also the primetime showdowns they're probably playing also, right? Yep. So like most of the people that are in that 8-figure category, I think are more likely. Like I think the people past the 25 million category, like you pretty much need to be a cat. Like you're playing cash game. You may be playing GPPs also, but you're more likely to be playing the head-to-heads, the large double-ups, the Thunderdomes, that type of stuff. But I think between the 10 and 25 million, there's still high-stakes GPP players that also won 50 max that I could see there being 80 of those people.
Yeah. I think in general, the people who are playing higher volume are the cashier type players, or the players playing lower risk contests than the ones that I play. Like they're not typically putting most of their money on the large field GPPs, I guess because you really can't. I mean, like I think I basically maxed those out last year, and I think I played around 2.5 million volume last year, and that's the most I've ever played, and that's with some high stakes stuff as well. But yeah, I don't think it's possible to get anywhere close to 10 million playing the lower stakes, the large field stuff. So I think that you're right, probably. It blew my mind at first because I had to think about, it's the people who are playing cash games who are actually getting down a lot more volume. It's just that money is being shifted back and forth a lot more.
Right. The ROI on that money is like maybe 2% or something. I mean, like,
yeah.
And that's the reason why, like, if you're putting in $50 million worth of volume at, like, let's just say you're putting in 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's say you're getting 1%. That's $500,000 in profit, right? 2%, that's $1 million, and like it sounds like a lot. Oh, they're putting a lot of money, but it's they're not starting with 50 million.
Right.
They have a 10 million. They have a $7 million to $10 million bankroll, and they're playing like $400,000 a day to generate like a 1 to 2% return.
Yeah.
Over and over, and they're spreading their money out on turbo slates and everything. Like, and that's what they're doing. I mean, like, we're not talking about GPP players here.
It's important. I think non-DFS players struggle with the concept that it's recycled money too. So, like, I could play $3,000 on the first day of the year, win back exactly 3,000, play exactly that 3,000 again, and like you're playing the exact same money over and over, and that's going to count as 3,000 times 365.
Right,
is what that's going to come out as money down. So it's really not as massive as a number. So when I say I'm playing 2.5 million, it's not like I have 2.5 million on the sites, or like I ever deposited 2.5 million or anything like that. It's just it's recycled money over
over and over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
But that's the appeal of DFS in comparison to like season-long best ball or sports betting. I mean, sports betting is related to that. Or the stock market, right? Someone will look at an ROI and go, why would I want to play 3%? If you have a 3% ROI in cash games, like why wouldn't I just, I could buy a bond for 5.5%. I mean, like, no, it's not 3% like APR. It's 3% a day.
Yeah.
Compounded over 365 days, while you're listing a 5.5% annual return,
Right.
right? If you have $100,000 and you're getting a 5% return, right? You're talking about what? $5,000. If you get a 5% return on $100,000 and you're betting 10% of your money per day, so you're paying $10,000 and you're getting an average return of 5%. Okay? So that's what? $500.
500. Yeah.
Right. And now your next day your bankroll is
More. Yeah. It's
100,500. Right? And now you're playing $10,050 into play, right? And you're getting on average 5% of that on average, right? Because obviously days you double and days you don't, right? I mean, it's not like you're gonna that's just on average over time. That by the end of the year, 365 days, the person that put their 5%, okay, I put it into a bond, they have $100,000, 100,005, right? $105,000.
Yep.
The person that is churning 5% a day probably has like $350,000, $400,000.
Right.
Right? Because you're getting that return like every day, not all. But people don't see a lot of. If you're trying to compare the two, it's different. And that's why when I look at best ball, I go, I get it. If you have like a 30% ROI in best ball, 30, 40%, if you like on average, if you could compute it, like, yeah, that's a good APR. Right?
Right.
But it's like, to me, that's like buying it's better than buying a 5% bond. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But you're not churning anything. If I had $100,000 and it's like, do I want a 40% return on that? Like, sure, yeah, absolutely. If it's risk free, sure, give it to me. But of course it's not. And turn that into 140,000. But if you say that instead you could get a 3% return daily, like I'd much rather have the 3% return daily because at the end of the year, I'm not going to have $140,000. I'm going to have like $220,000.
Right.
Right. So like that to me, that's the reason why best ball does not appeal to me, because I don't think you're essentially playing one slate.
Yeah.
So
it's
like
very time consuming to play that one slate.
Right. I'm playing one slate with 150 rosters when I could do that like if I wanted to, like 5 times daily.
Right.
No, truthfully, like maybe 8 times daily because there's 2 sites in multiple sports, in showdowns, and who knows what. Like if I have enough of an edge in best ball, like even if it's a smaller edge in DFS, why wouldn't I rather sports betting? Why wouldn't I rather just if I could find off lines and be able to get the money down? That's the main thing. Why wouldn't I want to take that $100,000 and do that daily, than to put $100,000 into best ball? Like
right. From an ROI perspective, assuming that you have, the same ROI in both, best ball doesn't make a lot of sense. If you have like the same EV in both, you'd rather get that in DFS where you can play daily and get daily returns. From a life perspective and getting bang for your buck, if you're not somebody who has a major positive EV, then best ball probably makes more sense. Where it's entertainment. You got a full year of entertainment for this one team you made.
Right. Well, of course, yeah. Well, once you take out the you're factoring in like doing what's best, time versus money, then yeah, of course. Then at that point, then it's subjective, right? Whatever you find to be whatever. Okay. So what I'm doing on that time versus money thing, you were saying something?
Oh, sorry. I was lagging there for a second. No, all I was saying is that I do both. I enjoy best ball enough that I'm still willing to do it. And I also think like theoretically, I feel like my EV should be better in best ball just because it's kind of an untapped thing. Like people don't really know what they're doing yet. The problem is I don't know that I really know what I'm doing yet either. It's not like I'm doing any kind of advanced research into best ball, but I think theoretically enough people are, not correlating their lineups at all and are making pretty terrible lineups that I should be able to find more edge in best ball than DFS. That has not been borne out in my results so far. But I've played 2 years, which is essentially 2 slates. So I don't know if I should read too much into that.
And getting on the subject we were talking about before with the exploiting, right? That cash game, exploiting 3-man, we were talking about all that before. And to tie it into that time versus money thing, I discussed it on the DFS pregame show towards the end today. That I'm gonna try an experiment because I'm getting sick of baseball, and I'm not a big. I'm getting sick of building 150. I'm getting sick of that. I'm just getting it. Just so much time. So like I'm just like I don't. Is the edge there? Is it worth the variance? I'm having, and we talked about this the last time. I'm having more of a focus on where are the edges rather than just doing what you're used to because that's what you're used to. And based on the conversation this morning, I want to see if I could do like take advantage of the FanDuel like 100-man, 20-man type of lobby. I need to see what people are doing a little bit more, but in the way of what I'm going to do is try to play the least I'm going to try to do that theoretically optimal thing to play the least duplicated, highest projected lineup, because a lot of people play cash game lineups into those types of contests, or they play like the chalkiest stack, chalkiest pitcher. So what I'm going to attempt to do, only because it'll take me much less time, is to basically download all the projections across the industry and look at basically what's the optimal lineup for this set of projections, what's the optimal lineup for that set of projections, what's the optimal lineup of the aggregate, and then look at all those lineups and see what are the correlations between those lineups. And if like Mike Trout, Mike Trout, Mike Trout, Mike Trout, I X out Mike Trout and then run what's the optimal lineup without Mike Trout. What's the projection difference? Because if the projection goes down way too dramatically, then I know I need to keep Mike Trout in the line. This would be more beneficial for more useful for NBA. Like yes, the $3,800 point guard that projects for 7 million points is going to be in all. But if I take him out, my projection drops 12 points. Like obviously, I don't want to get rid of those people. But then look across and go, what are the most correlative pieces? Like out of these 4 lineups, 4 of them have Mike Trout. 3 of them have Rafael Devers, right? 2 of them have this. It's like, and then go, if I eliminate the duplication, right, of the lineups, and I try to be as less duplicative for the highest projection, theoretically, the more that my opponents duplicate each other, just like we were talking about before in a progressive payout structure contest, we're not necessarily even talking about duplicating their own lineups. In a perfect world, I would want 2 of my opponents to have the same exact lineup, right? We talked about that before. Gives me equity automatically. But let's say 2 people don't have the same lineup, but they're a 1v1. Well, that's close. That's close to that also, right? Because now, as long as I don't play these 7 players together with each other, these 2 guys have too much of a duplication amongst themselves that they're fighting out just one player. But maybe across a 10-man contest or a 100-man contest, I'm not talking about 1,000-man contests. I'm talking about 100-man or less, where people are more likely to play cash-style lineups. Mm-hmm. Can I find the most duplication amongst those lineups and simply exploit by not playing that combination of players? So I'm kind of like going, the projections don't even matter anymore. Like, unless there's a situation where one guy projects for way too much, and that would be more likely to happen in basketball than in baseball. Yeah. But simply doing that. So essentially, I'm not thinking. All I'm doing is I'm going to find 4 lineups, eliminate the guys that are the most duplicative between those lineups. What's the highest projected lineup, regardless of correlation, right?
Yep.
And play that lineup. And as long as I'm like a 6v6 off of all these combinations, theoretically, and my projection doesn't go down by more than like a point or so, theoretically, I should have the most equity. If I simulated it, should have, on average, the most equity available in the contest. Assuming that it's a progressive, it has to be like 100-man top 12 pay, right? 20-man top 3 pay, top 4 pay, 10-man top 3 pay, a 3-man, a 5-man, those types of contests.
But so you're not planning on running stacks here?
That's the only. In NBA this would be easy because you wouldn't have to worry about correlation. That's the only thing that I'm debating. Okay. Should I be, because it's still a GPP? to some
Right.
extent,
100
and
man.
correlation matters, especially on FanDuel baseball.
Yeah.
Should I be running, should I at least be running a 4-man stack? Even if it's a
Right.
4-1-4X lineup. Should
Right.
my top projected lineup be 4-man? Or I think I solved my own problem, Neil. I think the only thought that should go into my mind is once I find the duplicated players between the lineups that are more likely to be played and X them out, run the optimal. As long as the optimal is within a point or so, even with those players X'd out, see that lineup, and that lineup may not be a correlated lineup. There may not be a stack in there. Then run, with those players eliminated, right, the same players eliminated, run a 4X lineup. So the 4X lineup compared to the all one-off type of lineup, if the projection difference is like a point between those, I'd rather have the correlated line. Then at that point, give me the 4-man stack because that's better off for GPPs. But if the 4-man stack versus the cashy non-duplicated lineup is like a 3 or 4 point difference, 5 point difference, then maybe I just play the 2-1-1-1 whatever. Like that would be the only thought process. Is the projection worth the correlation? Which is what you should be thinking out about anyway.
I would think in that case, I would take the correlation. It was like 3 points. I would think the correlation is worth more than that. But
I don't know. I'm saying 3 just as an example.
Yeah. Right.
I'm saying use the X, whatever that number is. But that's the only thing that I would have to judge. Yeah. Is the correlation worth X amount of points in projection? And then play a 4. Don't play a 4-4. Don't play a 4-3. Because I still want to keep my projection very high. And just play a 4X. And as long as I'm not have those combinations that are the most duplicated, I'm theorizing. Maybe I'm wrong. Email me. Tweet me at BlenderHT. Email me, jordan@theoryofdfs.com. To me, this only works if I'm able to predict lineups. Like, obviously, if I take a look the first couple of days and I'm like, yeah, people really aren't playing these 4 lineups. And it's like, no, actually, Trout was only 15% on in this contest, even though I thought he was going to be in all the, then I see that people are not playing these optimals and even close to those. Then my whole thing goes out the window because now I'm just playing a lineup that I think is better than other line. Then it doesn't satisfy the, am I gaining enough equity simply by not being duplicative?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting experiment. I've always assumed that in 100-mans, people are still running stacks, but maybe you've found different in your... I don't play a lot of 100-man contests,
right?
Except occasionally I play like FanDuel, like qualifiers. Occasionally I'll do MLB qualifiers, and I think they're typically stacked,
But also you have to put into the perspective of, with what I'm doing, let's say, for instance, that in all the cash optimals, right, or something like that, let's say it's the Blue Jays, for instance, and you see, the cash optimal from all these sources, Bo Bichette's in all 4 of them, and Teoscar Hernandez is in 3 of them, and Vlad Guerrero is in 2 of them, right? And I eliminate Vlad, Bo, Bichette, and Teoscar. What's most likely in the 100-mans? Most likely people are playing a 4-man Blue Jay stack, and I've already eliminated 3 guys that I'm not going to be in my lineups. So what are the chances my 4-man stack is going to be a Blue Jay stack?
Probably pretty unlikely.
Right, and what's chances I'm going to have one off Blue Jays? Unlikely. But,
right,
unlikely. So basically I'm not being correlative to those lineups because the guys that are projecting the best that are going to be in most of those lineups are also more likely to be part of stacks.
Yeah.
In general, right? If Trout and Ohtani are chalk, I'm most likely going to see Angel stacks in my 100-mans, right? So if I know play Angel stacks, I'm automatic. It's unlikely that by eliminating Ohtani and Trout and pressing the 4-man stack optimal, that I'm going to get like Taylor a 4-man Angel stack that doesn't have Trout and Ohtani in it because I've eliminated them already. So I don't want to be and the best case scenario is that I'm playing a 4-man whatever the hell stack, and I have 30% of my opponents playing an Angel stack, and another 30% of my opponents playing Trout or Ohtani in their lineup, and then another 30% that are playing Jared Walsh in their lineup, and then, I'm relying on the fact that I have no Angels in my lineup, and it's like, dude, as long as the Angels don't go nuclear, Like, I've eliminated like 90% of the lineups in this contest, and my projection difference is only 2 points.
Right. Yeah, it's best case scenario. I think it's also depending on the slate. I think a lot of times just playing the optimal, you're going to have stacks, which
Right.
we've seen. Like if it's a Rockies at home situation where the team total is, or the game total is 11.5, and the rest of the games are 9 or lower, probably the optimal is going to have some stacks from that game anyway. But
I'm theorizing.
It'll be fun.
And
fun to see what happens.
Right, I'm doing it on FanDuel, but I'm contemplating. See, DraftKings, it doesn't happen. I'd rather do it on FanDuel. FanDuel's a little softer. The problem on FanDuel is that I can't download anything, right? Because what I would want to do is download the contests just to see if I run it out again. Like if I just run a simple like Monte Carlo simulation on all the players, see what the results, because of the duplication between players. So I don't just, because if I don't do that, I basically just need to have a large sample size. So I need to do this, and I need to do it consistently for the rest of the season, type of thing, to even come close to some type of thing like that. But it would be so much easier to just simulate it out, even in Excel, that it's just like, okay, this is what the 100-man looked like, and I played this lineup, and these guys played that lineup. Let me just run out outcomes and see how often do I beat out like certain things, and then what my equity is based on, because of the duplication of the players combinatorically. Like, I'm sure someone else could do it. I'm sure someone's listening right now going, yeah, I could they could do it. They could do it themselves. But DraftKings would be so much easier because I could just download the goddamn CSV and just put it in and do it. FanDuel, I would literally have to just go through and manually input or scrape it, which FanDuel you pretty much can't do anymore. Anyone that does probably gets 7 million recaptures.
Yep.
Right. I don't get, because I haven't tried in God knows how long. So I don't get that as often. But you could always tell whenever I see people complaining about captures on FanDuel. It's like they've been trying to scrape the site a lot.
Right.
And FanDuel says go fuck yourself.
Yep. It's frustrating.
So that's what I'm up to. What are you up to? Anything before we get out of here?
I will be recording an interview of High Stakes tomorrow with Need Lunch Money, Eric Most, who, as I told you before the show, he's the guy who had previously made a comment on one of my posts when Brian Jester came on, and I asked for questions. He said, tell me what it's like to have come up with the most interesting what's probably the most interesting DFS podcast right now. And we kind of made fun of that he kind of, in response to my own post asking for questions about for Jester, he basically said that I don't have that Jester's podcast is better than mine. But we were just making fun of that, and found out later that he is Need Lunch Money, and I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow, which I talked to him a little bit. He seems like a really sharp guy. It'll be an interesting conversation. So recording that tomorrow.
Even if you don't have the most interesting podcast of the type, how many are there?
There's not. I mean, that's the thing. There's not that many.
Well, so what does it matter? As long as there's not that many, everyone's listening to anything anyway.
To me, that's a good point.
Right? I mean, like, to me, it's like the types of podcasts like that are like mine, yours, and Brian's. Is there any other podcast
DFS discussions?
Yeah, that has
not that I'm aware of.
General DFS discussions or interviews where it's not just slate related, where it's not just sport related or anything, where it's just like just two people having a discussion. Of course, Brian deals more with the swings and the bankroll side and that type of stuff, and less on the strategy. Yours deals with more of the process, right? You go into like more how I have a single person, tell me about your life and tell me about your process. And this is just more, I've always, even though I have guests on, I've never considered this an interview show. To me, it's just like two respected, good players just talking about what they feel like talking about that day. Based on what has been happening.
No real plan.
No.
Going in, just we're going to talk about whatever comes up. Yeah.
Right, and that's why you get into certain moods.
They're all unique shows.
Right, you get into certain moods. It's like, oh, sometimes you want to talk about this, and sometimes it's like, well, this thing happened, and let's talk about that, and which makes it very easy to plan for.
That's right.
Right, because you just say what's up, and that's it, and you start.
Yep, exactly.
Player Q DFS on Twitter. High Stakes Podcast. Find it on all the places you get your podcasts. On Stochastic. It's going to take a while to get used to that.
Yeah, a few times since the switch. I think it's inevitable. We've been the site's been Osmo forever. We've all called it Osmo forever, so it's kind of natural to want to keep calling it Osmo. But yeah, it is now Stochastic. I'm getting used to it. Getting used to saying that. I'm gonna have to switch the hat so I have the visual reminder that it's not Osmo anymore.
Behind the scenes, do you guys call it Stoke or something?
I have not heard it called Stoke. Just Stochastic so far.
Get stoked. STOK apostrophe D. Right? Get stoked. Stoked.
Cool.
I'm stoked.
Cool. Maybe that'll be our catchphrase at some point. I don't know. Endless possibilities.
But of course, you go from a site name that people misspelled to another site name that people are going to misspell.
That's right. Yeah. Very true.
Because people are going to put in Stochastic. They're going to put in Stochastic, and they've changed the K and the D.
Stochastic, and yeah,
right.
It'll be an adjustment for sure.
Scotastic with SK.
They'll spell it the way the word is spelled Stochastic. I see the word that it is based off of, and this is K instead of CH.
Right. In order to get the trademark, of course.
Yeah.
Because you can't have the CH in it because it's a regular word.
Yeah.
Right. People behind the Tom knows what he's doing, right?
Yeah. They know what they're doing.
They know exactly what they're doing. And you can find me at Blender HD, as always. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass. You can pick up at theoryofdfs.com.